Hey guys, and welcome to our introductory podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Spirit Meets Venture, and I'm Shane Gadd, www.shanegadd.com. So guys, what I wanted to do is to just kind of give you an insight into where we find ourselves, kind of explore some of that with you, and also to kind of, weave in some wisdom as always, and really kind of share with you why we are doing what we do in the way we do it, and especially as we move forwards. I'm sitting here and I'm looking out the window and I can feel the warmth of the sun, which is really, really lovely and beautiful. I'm looking and thinking that sun is seeming a lot higher in the sky today. It's really clear blue skies, and you can see kind of movement out there. Nature is beginning to stir and wake up, which is one of the reasons why recently I shared the post. Something that I committed to over this last year is around the equinoxes and around the solstices, is to stop, pause, reflect, get out within nature. I'm by myself to spend a day or even an overnight solo trip, to just kind of pause, and over this last year I've made that commitment and seen that commitment through in one form or another to really kind of connect to that, and I was inspired to do that by a wonderful guy called Al Humphreys, who was encouraging people to have micro adventures around the equinoxes and the solstices, and to naturally kind of just stop, pause and take stock. And I thought, over this next year, I'm going to commit to that in a way that I can, if that be a day, if that be several hours, or that be an overnighter. And it's been so beneficial. So I think that my post that many of you had got to read and connect with recently via Spirit Meets Venture Facebook was kind of expressing that as spring begins to stir, there's a stirring in me, and I was beginning to kind of take stock of where we are. And one of the things that I've done over this last year, when I have got out around the equinoxes and around the solstices, is to kind of look back, because if you kind of break the equinoxes down and you break the solstices down, it's every 3 months, and I think what an amazing opportunity to just stop, to take stock and reflect. And one of the questions, or some of the questions that I've asked myself is, over these last 3 months, what have been my trials, tribulations? What have been my celebrations? What have been my joys? And most importantly, what can I take from those experiences? What can I take from them, and how am I going to apply that experience as I move forwards? And importantly, where do I find myself? Where am I going? And importantly, really importantly, is this all in alignment? And I think it's such a healthy thing to do, to just stop, pause and ask yourself those questions. And every 3 months, it means that, you're kind of checking in to kind of get a sense of, are you in alignment? Are you moving into alignment? Are you continuing to move into alignment? And if not, why not? And I think this is the heart of so much, because I kind of look out in the world and moving through the world on two wheels. One, you're moving at a slower pace, and you also see things that you don't always see if you're moving through the world in other ways. And a dear friend, Matt Anguini from Golden Glow Cycle Recycle, Matt often says, that you're either moving in time, so you're present and you're in time, or you're moving through time, which is kind of literally just moving through time, almost on autopilot. There's two things about autopilot, you know, you kind of do it and you get to work and you go, oh God, I can't remember going through that roundabout. That's okay, that's a meditative state quite often. Or you're literally just ripping through time and you're ripping through experience after experience because you've got to get somewhere. There's this hurried rush. And I think that if you kind of look out in the world and you just kind of connect for a moment and you say to yourself, what is one of the greatest emotions moving through humanity at this time? So just take a moment, yeah? Just take a moment right now and ask yourself, what is one of the greatest emotions moving through humanity at this time? Just take a moment and connect with that. Some of the answers that I get from people when I ask them that question is a sense of heightened anxiety. Is one of the greatest replies I get. And the other is a sense of uncertainty, a sense of fear, a sense of distress, a sense of I can't breathe, feeling edgy. And if you look at all of those kind of responses, they're kind of some of the ones that I get, or a sense of loss, feeling lost. You kind of look at those responses, they're all very, very similar by nature. There's a similar thread to them, a similar feeling to them, similar energetics. And I think that what that's been born out of is a few things. One, I feel that, you know, so many people are kind of awaking to a sense of almost connection to the collective consciousness, the collective emotion and feeling that is within the world. You know, there's a heightened empathy. But I think predominantly what is going on is that people are feeling that, and it becomes kind of almost, it's rubbing off on the world around you. And I think at the heart of it is that you've heard of fight and flight, and I wrote about this recently. You've heard of fight or flight, yeah? That going back, that was hardwired into our makeup as self-preservation, so that we would be able to survive. So if there is a threat, we're in a threatening environment, or we're being threatened, fight or flight response would be for self-preservation. You know, you're talking about cavemen times, yeah. But I think that, you know, it's still hardwired in there. But what's happening is modern day living is triggering that absolutely response in people. You know, if you kind of look at the world around us, we're living in a time where everything is always on. We're moving into an always on lifestyle, which is some of what I wrote recently about where we find ourselves and our core values, and why they're so very important to us and very important to me. And we're living in a time of always on lifestyle, which means that we are literally hurrying through life. You know, how many people say I don't have enough time? And what I feel that we're moving into with Spirit Meets Adventure is really, you know, at the heart of what we do is connection to self, connection to each other, connection to the world around us, and connection to the innate. You know, for me to be able to do the work that I do, you know, I make connection with another human being, I make a connection with self, and I make a connection with those that we've loved and lost, connection to the innate. You know, it's the heart of what we do. And if you think about the world moving at the speed it is, we're constantly being, you know, that fight or flight, you know. So, you know, so many people I get to meet, wonderful, amazing, courageous people I get to meet, are saying to me, you know, there's a heightened anxiety. And what I think it is that, you know, everything's moving so fast that it's become very unnatural. You know, the sense of pressure that so many people feel nowadays is completely out of cohesion to what we're designed and how we're designed and the way we're designed to live, you know, because we are by default we're part of the natural environment. That's where we come from, so we're kind of, you know, greatly connected to the great outdoors. And I think the more further we walk away from or come away from the great outdoors and what is natural, the more unnatural everything becomes, and the more those responses happen. You know, stress-based illness, for instance, has become the norm. But is it the norm? You know, and everything's feeling very, very unnatural. You know, the other day I was listening to a radio show, and it actually made me laugh quite a lot, because they were discussing the fact that there's going to be a lettuce shortage and a cucumber shortage, and I just kind of, you know, burst into laughter, and I was in fits of laughter. And then I think it was that day or the day after, I went grocery shopping, and there was a lady, and she had about 16 cucumbers in a trolley, and she was gathering up all these lettuces, because some supermarkets were going to ration cucumbers and lettuce. And I looked at her and thought, she's panicking. But what was really, really interesting was that my grandfather, you know, he's had an allotment for years and years and years. Ever since I can remember, he's had this allotment. And if you said to him, you know, how's your cucumber and lettuce going in the middle of winter, he's going to look at you and go, what? And this gentleman on the radio was saying, you know, I don't know why everyone's concerned or worried. There's nothing to worry about, because we're not designed to eat cucumbers and lettuce during the winter. But that's the way the world's become. It's become very, very unnatural, which puts a unnatural demand on the environment and kind of, in a way, our bodies. You know, should we be eating that during the winter months? It doesn't grow very naturally. We're having to import it from the likes of Spain and warmer climates. They've had snow, so there isn't the produce there, you see. So it's unnatural. And I think, you know, that's what we're getting at, is that some of why we feel the way we do is because we've moved away from what is natural to us. You know, if you kind of look, you know, so we're talking about moving through time or in time, and I just think when Matt shared that with me, you know, it's such a powerful way of looking at the world around you and the way you're engaging the world around you. If you kind of walk through a shopping mall, for instance, and you take a look, and you look at a coffee shop, and you look at the people within the coffee shop, what are they doing? What are they doing? What's happening? What's going on? As we often say, there's never nothing going on, there's always something going on. Okay? Take a look, what's going on? I would say to you, a large percentage of those people are not engaged in conversation. They're looking down, and they're looking at their devices, and they're looking at their mobile phones. You know, what's starting to happen is that we're losing, I believe we're losing, from what I feel and the conversations I have with the deeper part of me in the innate, is that I believe that we are moving away from what is natural. We're definitely moving through time. We're not always in time, and we're starting to lose the connection to the world around us, to ourselves, and to each other. And that's, you know, it is at the heart of our human experience. You know, I can remember, you know, the last expedition and trip that Sarah and I was so blessed to undertake. We were coming through Fort William, and we'd had a couple of days there. We literally dried out. It was phenomenal. We literally dried out. We were so soaked previously, and we were leaving Fort William, and it was a warmer day, and the sun was out, a bit like today really. and we're coming out across this lock along the Caledonian Canal. And if you ever get the opportunity to go out towards the Caledonian Canal, you must. It is just absolutely beautiful. You know, the canal meets the mountains, and we've come across this lock, and this guy was approaching us, and like us, he had all his kit on his bike, and as we approached each other, we braked. And without a word being said, we just reached out and shook each other's hands as if we were going to pass each other, but we stopped and shook each other's hand. And that was all unsaid, and it was very just kind of felt non-verbalized for sure. And we smiled at each other, and he kind of tapped me in the arm, and it was a very warm exchange. And then we started to share, and one of the things I said to him, you know, is, where are you heading? And he smiled at me, and there's a twinkle in his eye, and he said, destination unknown. And then he started to share where he come from, and he actually started the trip not far from where we lived back home, and he had gone down to the coast, down towards Brighton, and he turned around and cycled all the way up north, and spent the last few months across Scotland. I think he'd been cycling at this point about 7.5 months. Incredible. But you know, at the heart of that is connection. You know, those sort of experiences, you connect with people on such a deeper level than you may do in everyday life. You know, everyday life seems to move very, very quick and very, very fast, and it's at the heart of our values, you know, is connection. You know, as I say, I wouldn't be able to do the work I do if I didn't kind of make connection. So it's something that's very, very important to us. And you know, something that Sarah and I share quite often is that through some of the experiences you have, you bond with each other very differently. You connect with each other. You know, you have a sense of looking out for each other that is very much at times non-verbalized. You know, you almost synchronize cycling across those sort of terrains. You kind of move into a synchronization that naturally just happens. And you look out for each other. You know, another incredible experience was coming out of the mountains, and we've been eating dry rations for a few days, and we were able to kind of stop at this place and be able to order a cooked meal. And I can remember sitting at this table with Sarah, who, you know, both of us were safe, and we'd come out of some harsh environment, you know, because, you know, one of the things that you kind of go through is that moving in the way that we do is sometimes you absolutely knew the nearest person was miles and miles and miles and miles away, and it kind of strips back a lot in you, you know. And we're sitting there, and we were safe, and we ordered this hot meal, and we had this cooked meal, and we're sitting at a table, and I felt very emotive and very emotional, and this huge gratitude for something that so many of us, I guess, do automatically, go and sit at a table. And it actually, you know, stirred up quite a lot for months to come, actually, you know, the importance of food, and kind of really valuing, you know, a hot meal, and the most simplest of things. And I think, you know, that's why I wrote what I recently wrote, and shared what I recently shared, was some of these things that I'm kind of exploring with you now were really beginning to stir up. And I think that, you know, at the heart of what we do, and the core values of Spirit Meets Adventure, is you know, to create simplicity in a very complicated world, simple truths for a complicated world. And also, you know, at the heart of that is connection with self, connection with each other, connection with the world around you, and connection to the innate. You know, I spend a fair lot of time, as I say, kind of, you know, moving through the world on two wheels, and that's now become a way of life. It's become an absolute lifestyle. It's become a way of life, something I kind of feel about that is that you kind of move through the world at a slower pace, but you also move through the world less intrusively, also in a way that is kind of more connected to the world around you. And you know, when you have some of those experiences that we had in Scotland, some of the experiences we had on our first tour where we literally just turned left, Sarah said, I know, let's cycle home, you know. We were at Plymouth at the time, and we cycled all the way back to Sussex, you know. Those kind of experiences leave a mark on you. They impact you in such a way that you're no longer the same person the other side of it. And in some ways, how can you be the same person the other side of it, you know, because they've touched you in such a way, in a very profound way. You know, I kind of find myself now looking, you know, if you kind of look at when we go touring, we literally minimalise. So we literally minimalise, you know. Our last expedition through Scotland is our home was a hammock, a mosquito net and a tarp, you know, and coming from the experience and the wisdom from bushcraft and outdoors, Liam, the bushcraft man, and you know, going back some of the military experience that I had many years ago, and you're kind of minimalising, and your home is attached to your bike, and it can be weeks like that. So what you start to recognise and realise is that everything you have has a purpose, has a meaning, has value, and that begins to rub off on the rest of your life, you know. So then you start to question everything in your world. Does it have purpose? Does it have meaning? Does it have value? Same in the environments that you spend time. Does it have purpose? Does it have meaning? Does it have value? Does it hold value to you? And then that rubs off on your relationships, you know. Are these meaningful relationships? Are they adding value? Are you adding value to them, you know? So you kind of really question everything around you. In a way, it strips everything back, which is why we're beginning to align, I guess, a little bit deeper to where we're going. And also it means that some of what we're doing no longer sits right, no longer feels right, no longer resonates with us in the same way. You know, take this podcast for instance, you know, this is a great example of this. You know, I kind of get a sense of, you know, podcasts being very unintrusive in the way that you can just listen to it and get on and do other things. That feels right to me. And the other interesting thing is, when I wrote the post the other day, I shared that post literally within minutes after of sharing that. You know, it's quite profound for me, that post. Is a suggested post popped up out of nowhere, but you know, I think some of these things that happen are never random. You know, they're kind of confirmation that, you know, from the innate, that what you've just stepped into is right, and what you're moving into is more deeply aligning. You know, it's their way of just saying to you, know, yeah, it's all cool. And this post pops up, this suggested post pops up from these guys called the Minimalists, and I watched it and I was really emotional, because what it done was reflected back at me some of what I was trying to find, to express and verbalise. I couldn't quite verbalise it, I couldn't quite express it, and it reflected back at me, and it was just absolutely saying to me, you know, this is where you find yourself. So if you haven't watched that, guys, I'd really encourage you all to kind of take some, you know, 20 minutes, cup of tea, and go and watch it. You know, it potentially could be very life-changing. So that's where we find ourselves, guys. So as we move forward, you'll find that there's a more simpler approach. I think we've always had a simplicity to what we do, but a more simpler approach. We definitely are going to be doing things very differently, and for us, you know, at the heart of what we do is connection. You know, as I say, it's connection to oneself, connection to the world the world around you, connection to each other, connection to the innate, and you know, at the core of that is also moving through the world at a slower pace. You know, everything we kind of do is now beginning to bolt together. There was a time there that it felt disjointed, you know, spirit meets adventure. I've always felt the cohesion, but there was a sense of, for a little bit of time there, is that there was a sense of they kind of were a little bit different in some respects. But as we move through this change we find ourselves, or through this transition we find ourselves, is that it's actually bolted together even tighter, and the cohesion runs even more deeper, you know, because when I say to you it's all about moving through the world slower, well, that makes sense. We jump on a bike, you know, and the wisdom, philosophy, spirit meeting adventure, it all just harmonizes, you know. So it's a very exciting time. Very, very, very exciting. I hope you've enjoyed as well. If you haven't listened to a kind of first podcast, this is a kind of introduction to where we're going, but the first podcast dedicated to a lovely, wonderful lady that has made that journey back home, and I had the honour and pleasure of spending some real quality time with her, and that podcast is in absolute honour of her and her life and who she stood for, and you know, I was really honoured to be able to spend some time with her, and we were exploring holistic mediumship, and that, you know, all information's information. So if you haven't listened, you may find that interesting as well. But you will if you follow us. You'll be able to kind of access her future podcasts as they unravel and as we go forward. So this podcast has been brought to you by Spirit Meets Adventure. I'm Shane Gadd, www.shanegadd.com. You can also find us on Instagram at shane.gadd, and I'm going to be wishing you guys a most wonderful day, whatever you do and whatever you get up to. Remember, you know, it's connection to oneself, to each other, the world around you, and very gently, you know, very gently, every now and again, just stop, pause and ask yourself, is all of this moving into alignment? Am I in alignment? If not, why not? I'll leave that with you guys. Have a wonderful day. Bye bye.